Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our November monthly webinar. Thank you all for joining us. We're looking forward to an interesting discussion today in Ethnic Studies and Grow Your Own Educator programs with Catch the Next Scholar Mentor, Dr. Angela Valenzuela. For today's session, Dr. Valenzuela has provided us with two handouts. One is a Grow Your Own Educators literature review, and the other is an article that provides an overview and narrative of Nuestro Grupo and Academia Cuba UDLI, which is a community-based education initiative based here in Austin. And without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Angela Valenzuela. Dr. Valenzuela is a professor in both the Cultural Studies and Education program within the Department of Curriculum and Instruction and the Educational Policy and Planning program within the Department of Educational Administration at the University of Texas at Austin, where she also serves as the director of the University of Texas Center for Education Policy and director of the National Latino Education Research and Policy Project. A Stanford University graduate, her previous teaching positions were in sociology at Rice University in Houston, Texas, as well as a visiting scholar at the Center for Mexican American Studies at the University of Houston. She is also the author of the award-winning books Subtractive Schooling, U.S. Mexican Youth and the Politics of Caring, and Leaving Children Behind, How the Texas-Style Accountability Fails Latino Youth. Her most recent book is titled Growing Critically Conscious Teachers, a Social Justice Curriculum for Educators of Latina Youth. Valenzuela's research and teaching interests are in the sociology of education, minority youth in schools, education policy, and urban education reform. And it is my great pleasure to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Angela Valenzuela.
Thank you, Lydia. This is wonderful to be able to do this webinar with your audience. This is going to be bringing to light ethnic studies as a key intervention, as a key reform in higher education, as well as grow your own educator programs. So I'll begin with the rationale, and I'll begin with ethnic studies. There's been decades of research in the area of ethnic studies. Most of it has been small scale. Christine Sleeter did a wonderful NEA analysis coverage over the last 40 years of ethnic studies, and in general finds positive correlations. What we now have is research on ethnic studies that comes and is inspired by the Arizona experience in the Tucson Unified School District, and of course a court case that ended up bringing myself and others to testify as expert witnesses so that we could indicate and demonstrate to the judge just how successful ethnic studies is. It's not about promoting anti-American sentiments. It really is more and mostly about helping young people develop an academic self-concept, but also feeling like they're a part of the American story, the American narrative. So they lost the case, fortunately, and we're left now with an amazing compilation of evidence and data, not just from Arizona, but from San Francisco and other places throughout the country that shows that ethnic studies is powerful when delivered in the context of our nation's classrooms. The focus has mostly been on higher education, although many of us who are involved in this this movement throughout the Southwest and in Texas are calling for ethnic studies to be taught in early grades. That is what we're doing in Austin, Texas, so we're different in that way, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So that's one pretty big movement, development, undertaking, much of it inspired in recent memory by Arizona, but of course it's part of a deeper history that connects to civil rights and to really the development of ethnic studies programs to begin with in the late 60s and early 70s. And when I say ethnic studies, I'm talking about Mexican American studies, African American studies, Native American and Indigenous studies, Asian American studies, Boricua studies, and the like. And the old language or earlier language at the K-12 level was multicultural education. I'm sure you heard that. Sometimes you'll hear something like culturally responsive pedagogy. The term that is being used today at the K-12 level as well is ethnic studies. And when we talk about the underlying principle being that of helping young people to develop an academic self-concept, it actually kind of makes logical sense when you think that this is a curriculum that comes directly out of the many years of research and writing and knowledge production at the higher education level. So that hopefully helps you to get a good sense of what ethnic studies is. I'll have a slide soon on key studies that point to its power as an intervention with respect to the achievement variables and outcomes that we care about, including college enrollment. Grow Your Own is another movement, and it also has a long history, and a good part of it also coming out of civil rights. We might even be able to pinpoint it at some point to, I mean, the history still has to be done, but possibly even pinpoint it to Cal State Sacramento. As under Tip Carter, some of you may remember Carter and Segura, who wrote an influential book in the late 60s that was part of their attempt to, for the first time in their own history in the California State University system, to actually bring in teachers of color, and in their case specifically Mexican-American teachers, into the state of California. But this educational history has not been written, so I'll leave it at that. And the idea that I wanted to present here was that what we want to do is merge both agendas, ethnic studies and growing your own educators. The Grow Your Own, or GYO, programs or initiatives, pathways, what that signifies is typically partnerships between higher ed institutions and local school districts, and hopefully community-based organizations, because that's what we're doing in Austin, Texas, and we've been inspired by our own work at the national level through NELRAP, the National Latino Education Research and Policy Project that was mentioned earlier. Another word that's thrown around is homegrown teachers. The idea there is to have these young people go into classrooms, maybe even as pre-service teachers through a partnership arrangement, and in the process of being paraprofessionals, this is one model design, they can ultimately occupy the very classrooms that they're paraprofessionals in while they're in college. So that's one model that we're trying to advance, and there's many kinds, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. But again, merging the two agendas would be really optimal. And when we're talking about growing our own educators, really we're always talking about critically conscious educators, which means that we're talking about ethnic studies. Here's some definitions. I think I've already covered that. Ethnic studies and grow your own programs. So I'll go to the next slide. I just did a literature review, and you do have that. It's the one that you can download, Grow Your Own Educators. It involved a lot of work for me over the past several months, just trying to plow through the literature, and also my own learnings and my own understandings that I've acquired from being the national director of this consortium of Grow Your Own projects throughout the country. NELRAP has sites, Cal State Sacramento is one of them, and really is our inspiration, but other sites are in Milwaukee, Chicago, Brooklyn, Dallas, Texas, and now Austin, Texas, we're the sixth site with Academia Cuautli. And so that experience gave me a lens toward understanding, well, what's Grow Your Own and what's not, and where does teacher recruitment begin and where does it end, and GYO programs begin, and oftentimes it's kind of blurry to figure these things out, because it's like a lot of people are doing partnerships these days, which is great. But this typology was what I arrived at through the process of just sifting through all the literature. Some are pre-collegiate, selective, and when I say pre-collegiate, mostly that means secondary. There's hardly any that I've come across. Grow your own programs that begin in the middle school and much less in the elementary. For the most part, for whatever reason, it's like high school to college. And some of them are selective, such as the South Carolina Center for Educator Recruitment, Retention, and Advancement. And some of them are non-selective, meaning that they'll take, and in fact they prefer and focus on underperforming students. And that would be Dr. Margarita Bianco's efforts through her program, Pathways to Teaching, out of Denver, Colorado. And I think she also has a site in Tennessee. And that's pairing up a grad student with a teacher, developing a curriculum for students that sometimes are on the verge of dropping out or they're just underperforming, and all of them graduate. The data are very impressive, and many of them go into college, not all of them into teaching. And she's writing about the barriers and stumbling blocks there with respect to teaching in her work that I encourage you to seek out. But the fact that they're able to get students who otherwise would not have a chance at all at many of them at graduation, but others at college attainment, getting them into college is a massive success, to her credit, her and her team. Then there's also, as I mentioned, this other way of thinking about Grow Your Own as either community originated or community focused. So we in Austin, Texas, with Academia Cuautli, that is a Nahuatl term that comes from Cuauhtemoc, or the root is in his name, and Cuauhtemoc means descending eagle, so Cuautli means eagle. And so we're the Eagle Academy, or the Cuautli Academy in Austin, Texas, and we serve children in a community center at the Mexican American Cultural Center. You're all welcome to come and join us anytime. We run from October through April. And when we're not in field trips, we're there at the Mexican American Cultural Center, 600 River. And we offer a co-constructed curriculum in civil rights and local history, indigenous heritage, immigration, what we're doing right now, and the cultural arts. Since we are a cultural arts institution and we really value the arts. And we assist children right now from 5 elementary schools. We pick them up on Saturdays and they get breakfast, and we teach them this curriculum. In January, we begin the actual Danza Mexica part of that. We have a partnership with a Calpulli, which is the way that the Mexica, the Aztecs, the Mexica, have always been organized in the form of Calpullis. If you've been to any place where you've seen the danza, they're not dancing, it's actually ceremony. And so ceremony is very important to us. And we're co-constructing a curriculum out of the ways of knowing of the Mexica community. This is the real deal. This is not an appropriation. This is working in tandem with a Calpulli, which is a coalition. They're coalitions of houses. And so whenever you see the bandera, the sign, that's the name of the Calpulli, of the coalition. And so that's how they've always been organized, and even under the ancient society in Tenochtitlan more than 500 years ago. Then there's the community-focused, university educator initiated Grow Your Own program, and I've already talked a little bit about Cal State University, Sacramento. They are it's a very strong teacher preparation program, and they're still administering Grow Your Own, and they are also the recipients recently of a major grant. I won't go into that because I don't have all the details, but apparently they got a perfect score in their application. And we're talking about millions, and I think it's millions of which they'll be a part, but going to the Cal State system for growing your own educators. So I can be a resource for you on any of that later, because they got it from the Department of Education, and perfect scores are unheard of, and they got it. And one of the main reasons they got it is because of NELRAP. The reviewers, 1 or 2, said that was a real high point, the fact that we're part of now a coalition or a network of grow your own schools. So NELRAB, Growing Critically Conscious Teachers, what you see here is the book that comes out of our collective work. I edited the anthology. I have a couple of chapters in there. And the idea here is really to engage our roots. We have deep roots in our communities that are in civil rights. We have an elder epistemology. So we have our elders. Some of you may know Martha Cotera, Modesta Trevino, that work regularly with us. We have Wednesday night meetings. We met last night, and we organize the activities of the group. And we're part of really concentric circles of different kinds of activity right now, including a very strong Austin Area Association for Bilingual Education community, ABE, that is that serves as a pool for us for teachers that we mentor. On Saturdays, we pair novice with veteran teachers, so that we're always administering this curriculum in a way that prepares teachers for it. We also have pláticas. We have adult ESL, because the parents that dropped their children off requested it. We have a wonderful, brilliant teacher, Cameron Allen, who does amazing things with the students. We have an amazingly talented team. The program gets funded by right now by Title I and Title III monies, and the applications go in by our districts in May or June to the federal government. And so so far we've been able to secure those dollars to pay for this project. We serve about 35 students regularly, but we are having district-wide impacts through the preparation of the teachers. We've prepared probably, I don't know, between 60 and 70 teachers in the curriculum already, but also because of the curriculum, up to half of it, we ran out of funding, but up to half of it is available district-wide right now in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 11. And so everything that we co-construct, and it's an iterative curriculum, so it undergoes shifts and changes because we're always trying to improve it, but it is available district-wide. What we're finding is that a big part of teaching this curriculum and having teachers feel prepared in it, so that then, and they're bilingually certified, some are dual language teachers, others are in bilingual ed programs. When they go back into their schools, the idea is for them to also teach the same curriculum in their schools. And so that's another way in which we're having broader impacts. What we hear from the teachers is that they find the third space, we call it a third space, that the Mexican American Cultural Center represents, a liberating space, because it's where they can teach, in their words, the way that they know how to teach. And this gets at the politics of education. We think about it with respect to students a lot, but it's also applicable to teachers. Teachers feel oftentimes like they're transgressing, they're breaking some rule just when they speak Spanish in the hall, or when they speak Spanish in the, in their conference halls, conference rooms, and whatnot. And so they're seeing that just being in a third space, something that's like not the university, not the school district, but in this case it's a community cultural arts space, that they're more free to teach the curriculum that we're co-constructing. For example, they don't know that they can teach the history of segregation. And they ask questions like that, and like, can I teach this? And well, yeah, of course, it's history. It's part of the history. This gets at the politics of education. So I'll segue to the next slide a little bit and look at the recent research on the positive effects of ethnic studies. And so you can check out, for your own time, these different studies. And they speak primarily to the experiences of students in ethnic studies contexts, but the underlying institutionalized forms of marginalization, of exclusion, of just really not really giving the Spanish language or even indigenous tongues or any other language than English the status that it needs for our teachers, even in bilingual education programs, to do due diligence based on their craft. So we're building a wall of protection and community for the teachers that we are really excited about, because a number of them have they're pursuing advanced degrees now. We've admitted maybe by this time next year, 4 into the doctoral program, 3 into the master's program. So the Grow Your Own, even though we're beginning at the elementary level, it happens right away. It happens immediately, the impacts, just by meeting in the community, being a presence, and really being a conduit for other kinds of opportunities. It's really beautiful, wonderful to behold. Here we have different kinds of advice on how GYO programs are organized. To me, this is just kind of the next slide is combinations of community, school district, state, university level partnerships to establish pathways into the teaching profession. So there's no one way to do this, and it really depends on local initiative, interest, opportunity. But I will put a plug in for the third space. I don't think that's a bullet here, but the third space is, I don't think we would have done some Mexica, for example, if we had been located in a school context, because you're in a space that kind of reinforces its own ideology, or even a university space does the same thing. But when you're in a community and you're not in an art space, it's more liberating, and that's what we're theorizing about this right now. For our students, it's also become our research site, so it's not like you're not doing the stuff that we have to do in academia. We're actually just in over our heads with projects and writing opportunities and publishing opportunities at the moment. And so it meets that kind of demand as well. So when we talk about ethnic studies, I mean, it's a little hard to define because it'll look differently everywhere, but there's critical perspectives, there's culturally relevant curriculum, social justice pedagogy, participatory action research. And so as I did the lit review on Grow Your Own, and compared it, for example, to teacher preparation partnerships, there's a whole literature around that for, between corporations and teacher and university programs, or districts and university programs to prepare teachers. What really separates GYO from that is the social justice pedagogy. Zeichner, the scholar, he talks about teacher preparation 3.0, and I really like that because it's sort of like getting past sort of, the first generation teacher preparation, which is preparing teachers, for specific, skills-based approaches to teacher effectiveness in classrooms, and teacher 2.0 is teacher preparation 2.0 is preparing teachers in a world of high-stakes tests and testing and high-stakes accountability. And 3.0 is conceptually very different, and it's solidarity. That is the operant terms. Community solidarity. One of the programs I didn't even mention that really aligns to this idea of community solidarity is Grow Your Own Illinois. And some of you may know about Illinois, what made Grow Your Own Illinois very successful out of Northeastern Illinois University was exactly that, was that solidarity of a higher education institution like NEIU with the community, and just sort of like almost a seamlessness between the community and the community stepping in to help, with the university when the university needed a constituency for addressing some policy issue or some policy need, and then the university coming in with the community to provide pathways for paraprofessional teachers. So there's a really beautiful storied history out of GYO Illinois, and what was very key there was dean support at Northeastern University in Illinois. That was very, very important. And so that's very crucial, is to have that dean support. So the next slide is It's strategies. I mean, this is more granular, and I mean, I'll just speak very generally to these strategies. One thing that we've done in our community is we got started, and we got started very organically. And universities are really good. We're really good to initiate. I don't think we should confuse initiating with leading, because if we're going to be organic and democratic, I mean, it's a process, and you know the leadership will come from the process, will come through the process itself, and not that it's predetermined, because sometimes universities actually aren't very well prepared to lead, since they're so disconnected from their communities. Not all of us are. I'm very connected, happily, and my husband as well, Dr. Emilio Zamora. He teaches in the history department, and so because of our involvement, we were able to very easily assemble a group of people on September 20th, 2013, to talk about literacy in children's books. Children's books is what really got us launched, was the concern about the lack of representation. It's really, really bad. I don't know if anyone has seen the data, but it's horrible from one year to the next in terms of the trade books that are published annually from the Northeastern book publishers. It's really lacks much to be desired, and it's systemic, it's institutional, but we do not have books anywhere close to what exists for the general population. Annually, books written by or about Mexican American, African American, Native American, Asian American book writers and illustrators, it's a pittance. We're talking about never ever more than 4 or 5% annually, if it's ever even reached that high. These are the books that get considered for awards, and this is a little digression, but it's an important one, because we had to process all of that. And but the teachers at the meeting that we had on September 20th, 2013 they were the ones, and we had a diverse group. We were very strategic when we organized. We thought, well, who do we want to be there, that you know, we wouldn't want them to, like, later at some point feel like they were an afterthought. So we thought of the historians, the archivists, the library activists. I mean, they exist. Children's book activists, like Oralia Garza de Cortez. Some of you may know her. She's you know, really well known, and she was she presented at that meeting. And then we had our bilingual education teachers, and they were very soulful and very emphatic that they do not have curriculum, that there's so much mobility in the school district. They've not been able to develop capacity and curriculum, that they have champions, and then they leave, and they're gone. And then all of the materials are also gone. And so that was what they asked for help with, and so we had to mull it around, and we thought, well, okay, well, let's start a Saturday Academy, and that is what we did. It's very important to, in the process, you know, really, like, you know, be real thoughtful and think about, you know, as you develop an after-school program, a Saturday Academy, any kind of intervention. I mean, none of us has infinite time. You know, we're all busy. We lead busy lives, and here we are wanting to, you know, create a space for children that we hope that they will enjoy. Well, that's a big order. That's a tall order. We want our children to be encouraged, and to be spirited, right? To have a good spirit, to feel confident in themselves and happy, right? And it's hard, particularly when our communities are under siege. But having said that, what we institutionalized for ourselves was a floricanto. Floricanto is an indigenous phrase. I mean, it comes from the Mexica, and I'm sure other groups, if not, you know, from the Toltecs. But the idea is to celebrate life, and to you know, to be intentional. And not everybody likes to sing. I do. Every now and then I'll sing, but most people want to share something, and we begin every meeting that way, with someone sharing something personal about themselves, something motivational, inspirational, and those have been some of our most beautiful moments that we've had. And I think it keeps us all, it builds trust, confianza, and it helps us to be spirited in a way that helps us to convey that spiritedness to the children and the parents and the families that we serve. I mean, we you know, none of us wants to get into an initiative that is that is just not any fun. It's not, that doesn't bring joy. I mean, if it doesn't do that, then I wouldn't do it. I mean, again, we don't have another life. We just have this one. So you can become a community-based organizations. Even if you're a faculty member and administrator, you can be part of the establishment of a community-based organization. We happen to also have a nonprofit that helps us to raise small funds that we need, incidentals that invariably come up. Our nonprofit is NELRAP, as it turns out. But you can identify funding sources, and beyond our our little nest egg, we also have a regular commitment from the district. We have a contract. We have an interlocal legal contract between the district, Nuestro Grupo is the name of our community-based organization, and then the Mexican American Culture Center, the MAC, and it goes up through the city. The mayor signs it, and the superintendent signs it, and then and Nuestro Grupo signs it, so that we can be in agreement about roles and responsibilities, and see the entire initiative through fruition. We have liaisons, one that connects, this is part of the budget, so it's like $50,000 annually. Most of that is for teacher salaries, transportation, books and supplies, and then breakfasts. Pretty much all of it goes to that, the district money. But it also pays for two other positions, and one is kind of an external relations between Nuestro Grupo. We have Anthony Martinez, who does a really wonderful job in connecting with the parents and the community and bringing the children in. And then we have another position, Randy Bell, who connects between Nuestro Grupo and the school district. He's got really good connections with the school district. He's able to get emails through and help me to connect to key individuals within the district for different kinds of needs that invariably come up. In terms of strategies, I mean, I think the only thing I'll point to is working is very slow and patient, but the idea really is ultimately for us to build a pathway for these young people into higher education. And we do have parents that tell us, well, but my son doesn't want to be a teacher. And that's fine. Your son does not have to be a teacher. That's, no problem. We're just really happy that he's with us, and we certainly hope that he goes to college. But having said that, we have a very, very serious crisis in our city and our state with respect to teachers, particularly with respect to bilingual teachers. We have shortages that are severe. And so this is a movement. This is how we want to think about our work. We're all motivated to address this here locally because it is a crisis for us locally. And we intend to be a community that thrives far into the future. Sustainability is the last point I'll make. Again, the community is so central, and that's why I'm saying that community-based organization is important, because what that means is that will sustain this initiative far into the future. I mean, I could leave and it will continue because it actually doesn't quite need me for it to continue. But and any one of us could leave and it would continue because it's part of the DNA now. At least we think so, of the community. So I'll stop there. I don't know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, that was wonderful. And so much important information. I will give our attendees some time to type in their questions, or if you have audio, feel free to use the hand raise feature, and I will unmute you. And I guess while folks are thinking of their questions, one of the questions that occurred to me was about, you're talking about growing your own educators, and one of the later points that you made of, about the parents that say, well, my son doesn't want to be, or my child doesn't want to be a teacher. I think about our students at the community college level and how so many are interested in going into business or going into the health professions. and very few express an interest, especially in the first semester, of going into education or being teachers. And now, I mean, I think there are opportunities, especially with our program, for them to change their mind, but now the movement is so much toward, making a decision very early on and sticking with it and the whole pathways movement and things like that. So I wonder if you can speak to, how we could identify strengths and encourage students to see education as an option, as a career option for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so one thing that we discovered in the course of doing all of this work is that there are these pre-college high schools, and one of them is in our feeder pattern, and in those pre-college high schools, they're already selecting careers and they're taking dual credit courses.
Mm-hmm.
And in our own feeder pattern, there are 50 kids at Travis High School, and they're in different grade levels, but there's 50 of them that have chosen careers in teaching. So, but they don't come to the University of Texas. So that's very, very interesting and disappointing, frankly. But so there are, I think sometimes we imagine that people aren't interested in teaching, but once you just like look beneath the surface, or if you look at, for example, TABE, you have the BESL students, the Bilingual Education Student Organization students, and those are the ones that are deeply invested in careers in teaching. So one way to promote it beyond that, to your point, would be to set up BESL clubs at the different levels. I think also you make teaching a very attractive career when you can create this kind of support system, this network and the support system around them. Here in Central Texas in Austin, and there's a history that goes back to Proyecto Maestría, which is a master's program for teachers here in bilingual education. Now many of them are experts, they're veterans. They're on fire. So we have an annual conference called the Adelante Conference here in Austin, and it's usually in March or April. And the attendance is massive, and we get about 700 bilingual education teachers from Central Texas districts. I think it's around 13 districts. And so I'm not really convinced that people don't want careers in teaching. I think that we just haven't created, we haven't addressed the conditions, the working conditions. And I think a lot more people, if they felt a sense of capacity here, that it would be different. If they feel alone and isolated, well, we're going to be looking at high rates of shortages, of losses of teachers, because they don't feel like they're respected, they don't feel supported, and so we see them come in and out. So we're always preparing teachers, but we can't retain them. And so I haven't done the math, but I'm in regular contact with many of our teachers, and I don't think we've lost a one. If we have lost any, we've it's in quotation marks. We've lost them to graduate school. We've lost them to other districts. But there's a strong sense of empowerment that we see happening right here. And we also have our DACA teachers, right? And a lot of them they're just so committed. And when you make it a part of a social justice agenda, it's that much more attractive. The ethics studies literature is outstanding. I mean, we've just rolled out in the Austin Independent School District ethnic studies for high school students, and it's I think that we really have potential here in the merging of the two movements, because if you don't make teaching attractive, and if you don't give teachers an opportunity to develop their craft, particularly as bilingual teachers, with a curriculum that's meaningful, right? Or that's not, if you don't give them a chance, and if the curriculum is like, it's assimilationist, it's not culturally relevant, then it's not that attractive of a profession. And I mean, I don't know that I would find it attractive because what we do breathes life into the curriculum. I mean, it's critical, but it again helps you to feel smart, to feel like, oh, I can connect to this because it's my experience. And the best of what we know of teaching is that it's not decontextualized, right? That's like the worst kind of teaching. Yet so much of the instruction that they're getting in our schools, because they're test-based and test-focused, is exactly that. We really need a curriculum that is contextualized and relevant and germane and social justice oriented. And Paulo Freire says we should put teaching in this, we should put learning in the service of social justice. And I think he had it right from the very beginning.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we have not a question, but a comment here from Juan Ochoa, who comes to us from South Texas College in the Valley. He says, this was nice and refreshing. I do agree. And I wanted to just ask one more question, if I could, which is about your last point and about that contextualization and making the profession attractive, and then to connect that to a point you made early on in the talk about the role of the third space and how the schools and even university spaces, college spaces can sometimes reinforce their own ideology. So how does that, it seems to me to be kind of a tension between the importance of the third space and making teaching as a profession attractive. So, you know, how does it work in spaces that are not necessarily community-based, but that are, you know, sort of more institutional?
To make them attractive, to make it attractive.
Yeah, and to like what you were just describing about, you know, kind of reinvigorating teaching by giving teachers time with their practice and to understand that, you know, teaching is meaningful. If, again, I think back to what you were saying about how some of the teachers with Academia Coaudli, you know, even kind of had questions about, like, is it okay for us to teach about the politics of segregation? Is that, you know, and things like that. So how do
Right.
you negotiate that?
Well, so I mean, I think what they come to realize, the teachers, is that they're not free, right? And so if our teachers don't feel free to be who they are, just particularly as bilingual teachers, to teach in the way that they know how, according to their craft and their linguistic and, you know, their other kinds of skills and abilities, according to their own epistemologies, their ways of knowing, for example, that include you know, bringing the community in and using their funds of knowledge to inform the educational process. I think that we're always going to be paddling upstream. I mean, basically, I mean, you're going to have some that'll wear it out because in their own classroom, in their own space, they actually create this environment, but it's like a micro environment where they have that, you know, that authentic caring that is part of their DNA, and they exist. Thank God. We would be in such a horrible situation if we didn't have these true heroes and champions in our communities. So I mean, it's pretty terrifying when we think about what the demand and the need is, and how it just becomes this this turnstile process, right? I mean we can graduate people. But it doesn't mean that even if they get certified and teach in schools that they'll last very long in those spaces. So I don't think there's any shortcuts. I really don't. I think that we have to, instead of keeping, you know, instead of doing the same thing the same way that we've always been doing them, we really have to begin to engage systems, right? And really, like, sort of disrupt ways of knowing and ways of being, not to be disruptive, but to really bring in the you know, the life-giving, nurturing curriculum. I like to be nurtured. Okay, I would not be a college professor doing what I'm doing if I myself weren't nurtured by what I do. It's just way too much work for it not to be that for me. And that I'm confident is what is at play for the teachers as well. Otherwise, they just get burned out and then they leave. So I think this is different. This is really different. What we're envisioning. We're envisioning really just really deep, ethical, loving partnerships. I mean, there's love, and there's caring, and we're not embarrassed to say that. We're not embarrassed to say that the most important thing that we can do is educate our children in society, and that's a sacred calling that we all have. It doesn't mean we go off on the deep end and preach religion, because we don't do that. What we do, but what we do though is we address the spirit, and we try to model those ways of knowing and ways of being that we know are nurturing and that are encouraging. And so it's really exciting. I mean, we have to make those kinds of like shifts and turns. It's almost more like in the doing and in the discovering that it happens, because it's hard to envision at the outset. It's hard to just plan that you're going to have this, enriching curriculum. I mean, what you think is enriching, I mean, you still have to test it, right? But the fact that we're all doing it, and that we're working in communion with each other, and we have a good spirit, there's a lot of goodwill, and we're very child focused, is what really carries all of us the distance. Everybody else it's volunteer. Everybody else, and again, there's no shortcuts. It's relational. It's relationships. I mean, once you have those relationships with the union. I mean, we're close to our local union. We're close to to our bilingual education teachers. We're close to the university. The idea is to create this this capacity so that we're administering the curriculum, but we're also testifying at the legislature. We're involved in local battles. We have to grow our own everything, right? We have to grow our own teachers, our own administrators. Our teachers now want career pathways into the principalship program. So now me and my colleagues are talking about what we can do to bring in bilingual education teachers, maybe give them 12 hours of principalship credit and then the certification, and they become our next generation of bilingual education teacher principals. So that's the kind of structural shift that that I hope to see within the next a couple of years or so that we can grow our own principals. Again, this is growing them, in a way that is organic. It takes advantage of local opportunities, resources, identities. It takes advantage of all of that richness, that wealth that we have, and then lays the groundwork for growing our own everything else, our own policymakers, our own city council members, and so every time we meet is a moment of growing our own, because we're growing, always growing our consciousness. We are all always working to decolonize our ways of knowing and understanding and live in the world which we know are very harmful to us. So it's very positive. It's very positive.
Great. And we have one last question here from David Barrientos, who asks, are there any resources to see how many and what topics of children's books are being published annually? And what advice would you recommend to someone like David who wants to publish raza-relevant stories?
Culturally relevant stories? Is that what he said?
He said raza-relevant stories.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good question. Gosh, because there are people who do that. And I'm not quite in those circles, but there's like a whole art around that, and with agents, and there's people that actually do this. And I think I've forgotten who my contact is right now, but the University of Wisconsin is where you're going to get the data, because they review the trade books that are published annually. And it's called the University of Wisconsin children's books, something or other. I can look it up here. What's it called? And maybe it's the Cooperative Children's Book Center. That might be it. Yeah, that's what it is. And maybe they would be some group to reach out to. I don't know that they would be the best group. Armando Rendon is someone who is a colleague of mine. He was one of the presenters with Horaria Garza de Cortez at the September 20th, 2013 meeting. So he could be a resource. I think Barbara Reynard Gonzalez out of San Antonio would be another resource. And then a former student of mine, what's her name? She just came to the Texas Book Fest. Her name escapes me, but I think that's the way to go, is to find, or Carmen Tafoya out of San Antonio. Reach out to Carmen Tafoya. She gets published with a local press out of San Antonio, her books, and so she could be a resource as well. So that's how I would do this. I would go to individuals that have published books and ask them how they did it.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'm getting texts and messages here about how much everybody has enjoyed this talk, Angela. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We really cannot thank you enough for taking the time to spend with us this Thursday afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you. It's such a pleasure. Thank you so much.